Wonderland here, and today we're going to talk about the Amber cards from the new set Rise of the Floodborn. It's going to be coming out soon, and we're going to talk about how this could impact your constructed decks. So let's dive right into it. We're going to start off today with Bashful, one of the first 7 dwarves we get to see. In general, its stats are okay, a 4-cost 2/5, quests for 3, you need another character in play to be able to quest with it, another dwarf in particular. And this could be pretty good. It highly matters and depends on how good the other 7 dwarfs are. A triple lore threat for 4 is not bad. We've seen Hans. It's already seen a lot of play. So we know there's a space for 3 lore, and a 5 butt's pretty big. Obviously they knew it was pretty decent, and that's why they put this drawback on it. Whether or not you can make that drawback matter is going to be how good this card is for you. Overall, it seems like a decent dwarf, and I kind of hope they're all at least this power level or more, but I'm sure they're not. I would say that this is like a solid 3.0, and if a 7 dwarf deck gets to come out and actually do some stuff, it's probably going to go up. In general, seems decent. Christopher Robin Adventurer. 6 cost 2/6 double lore. When you ready it, if you have 2 or more other characters in play, you gain 2 lore. Really set up to gain a lot of lore. You could gain 2, 4, 6, 8 lore in a turn if you have a deck built all around it using untap effects such as Shield or LeFou. It does seem a little hard to get going, and it very well is probably a win more card. In general, though, it seems decent. Like a 3.5 has potential to be very good. It has potential to see 0 play. It might be too much to put together. We've seen that Surfer is pretty big. It costs 1 more, but it also has the same requirement of 2 units in play to get its ability. Luckily, this treks every turn, so you can play it and then play 2 more, and then the next turn. It's also possible that if you have a shield in play, you could play this, untap, play 2 1-drops, quest, untap it with shield, and get that extra 2, so even if you don't have any when you play it. So there is room for it. But in general, I'd say it's a 3.5, a little bit of a build around, which is something I like to see. Adds more variety. Cinderella Ballroom Sensation, a 1-ink, 1/2, quest for 1, Singer 3. At first glance, this card seems pretty subpar, and then the more you look at it, the better and better it gets. In a vacuum, it's kind of meh and mid, but when you realize that there's a lot of very good songs for 3, its stock goes up. When you realize there's a very powerful shift Cinderella that can sing on or shift onto this is very big. Its numbers are kind of weak, but a 1-cost shiftable unit that can sing 3 drops, like this is at least a 4. In general, this is the type of card I like to see. Very powerful, and I'm going to be putting 4 of it in the Amber Steel list right from the get-go. This is going right into Wonder World. It's chef's kiss. Cobra Bubbles, 7 ink, 5/9, 2 lore. In general, this card is just subpar. I will never want to really open this or the other handful of vanilla, expensive, do-nothing rares. Not much to say here. A 1.0, 1.5. 3 ink, 2/3, double lore. Doc, leader of the 7 dwarves. Share and share alike. Whenever it quests, you pay 1 less for the next character you play. Seems decent. It is an Amber Mickey, basically, for units. Similar to Lantern, we have a form of ramp that only impacts units. It's quite possible to see a Lantern on 2, this on turn 3, and another 1-drop, and then the next turn, some craziness with either 0 to hero, or just attacking with this, and the 4 ink from your turn, the Lantern, and this gives you 6. You can play countless big threats. In general, as long as the other 7 dwarves are at this power level or above, then we very well might have a dwarf archetype. I would say this is a solid 3. It has a high potential, and it could also see zero play, but in general, I think that Doc here is going to have some impact. If, like, it's not going to be a big one, but if there's going to be a 7 dwarf deck, Doc is going to be a key cog, and it kind of fits well into the Amber Sapphire ramp decks that are happening. Whether or not it could actually replace a Mickey, that's kind of a tough call. It does kill more things than Mickey, and it can also be inked, where Mickey you basically have to cast to get its bonus. Dopey, always playful. More like Dopey, always painful. A 3 ink 2/2, lures for 1 with an ability that gives you attack when it dies. Does not really do much. If this said all the other 7 dwarves get +1 or +2 lore until the start of your next turn, I would be all about it. But as it is, I just think it's overcost, underpowered, and a subpar ability. 1.5. A 5 ink 1/9 2 lore, Adora Accomplished Seamstress. I am just very happy you're not a rare. It is a mid card, a 2.0, a 2.5 in limited. It just doesn't really do much, but there's the possibility in a heal deck having a 9 butt for only 5 ink could actually see some play. The issue is, how are you dealing it damage? You have to be attacking into your opponents so they can play around it. In general, fairly weak. Gaston, Baritone Bully, a 3 ink 3/3 that quests for 1 and has Singer 5. It just seems highly unlikely that this card is going to see any play with Ariel around. Now, that said, having 8 Ariel effects, 8 Singer 5 effects at 3 cost could be pretty good. This card is not bad. In general, I think it's decent, slightly above mid. It's just there's better variants at the same cost in the same color. But if you're themed, you need a Gaston, you need a villain, maybe sometimes Dreamborn matters. It has some play. It's a 3 ink 3/3. It's a 3-star. 2 ink 2/2 for the old Grand Duke Advisor the King. Only lures for 1. Your Prince, Princess, King, and Queen characters get +1 power. It is a solid 2.0. If you're looking for a 2-drop that can maybe have a slight ability for your princesses and kings, you could get there. In general, I'm not a fan of raising the attacks of my other units. This card would be so much better if it increased the lore gain of all of those instead of the power. And honestly, a 2.0 is probably a little generous. It just has an okay stat line of being a 2/2. Once again, I wish this was an uncommon. At 4 ink, being a 3/4, lore for 1, grumpy, bad-tempered. Its ability, pumping all other dwarves on their attack. It just kinda falls a little short. If it cost a little less, had a little bit better stats, maybe if it impacted lore instead of combat. All of these are small minor issues, and when put together, I think in general it's kind of just a 2.0 card. You'll probably play it if you are themed on 7 dwarves or drafting dwarfs. In limited, it is a okay-ish stat line. I would just pass on it in general unless I was themed. Coming in at 5 ink as a 3/5 that quests for 2, Happy Good Nature is not that bad. It has support, and in general, you're not going to want to play it in Constructed, but this seems decent, if not good, in Limited. But for Constructed, tricked you with all the positive sounding words I said earlier, because in Constructed it's a 2.0. It just costs way too much and does way too little for what we want to be doing in a Constructed deck. And it's frustrating because if I was going to play a 7 dwarf themed deck, I would want to have one of each type of dwarf in it. And if they keep showing up to be this kind of meh or mid, it'll leave me a little disappointed. King Louis, Jungle VIP. At 7 ink, it is a 3/8 that quests for 2. Whenever another character is banished, you can remove 2 damage from this character. This is a unique ability. It's a little expensive for what it does, but it is kind of a role player, a synergistic, higher end unit that will be harder to kill without direct removal or board wipe. And if you have Rapunzels or other characters that draw you cards off of healing, gain lore off of healing, this could do things. In general, I think it's going to be a little too slow at what it does. Probably quite good in limited. For constructed, though, I'm only going to give it a 2.5. Pretty expensive. Has high synergistic combo potential. So at least keep an eye on it, but in general, it's either going to be too good or not good enough, and unlikely it'll ever be in the in-between. Mickey Mouse Friendly Face. 6 ink, 1/6, triple lore, and has like quite the possibly absurd ability of whenever this character quests, you can pay 3 less for the next character you play this turn. This can definitely create some degenerate states where if you ramp this out and then you can ramp out something higher, is this how we're going to get to see people play 9 cost Goofy, questing for 5 lore on turn 6? It's probably a bit too much of a win more. When it first was spoiled, lots of people were trying to jam it into things to see how it goes. I'm kind of just meh on it. It has potential. It looks fancy. Its stats are kind of meh. A 1/6 does not do much, but it is a role player. Its job is to get something bigger into play. And then after it does that, it gains 3 lore. Or it gains 3 lore as you do it. And that is not bad. Ramp gain 3, has a big butt, so they have to kill it. I would say it's a solid 3.0 to 3.5 with some potential and synergies. Mufasa, Mufasa, Mufasa! Betrayed Leader. At 5 ink, a 3/3, gets in for 2 lore. It's going to have you channeling your inner hyenas every time it's banished. You may reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a character, you may play that character for free, and it comes into play exerted. Otherwise, you leave the card on top. This is an interesting card with quite the interesting, unique ability. There is possibly some combo synergies with it, but there's not very many. It would have to be with Amethyst using Ursula's Cauldron or some of the variety of cheaper units that when they quest or you play spells, you may rearrange the top cards of your deck. In general, it's probably gonna mostly be used as a mid-range reoccur threat against other mid-range decks or a card to try to take advantage of your opponent playing a Be Prepared. No one wants to cast Be Prepared when there's 1 or 2 of these in play, because who knows what gets put into play. They still might maintain 3 to 5 lore based off of 2 of these in play. It could also just whiff. When with the amounts of extra amazing songs coming into play, there's a high chance your opponent's deck isn't going to be only units. That said, this is a 3.0 solid card, high potential, could easily be a 4.0, but it is a 5 cast 3/3 lore too. There is variance on this card that could just fail you, and that can be quite frustrating when it happens. The power level and the parachute that this gives you as a backup plan and a way out from just losing to a Be Prepared, it will see play. Mulan, 3 ink, 2/3, quests for 2 lore. She is quite the free spirit, so much that she helps teammates. Exactly what a free spirit does. She's just pretty meh. Quite mid. At least she has 2 lore. Support is an okay ability. In general, this is something that will probably only see play in limited. I would say it is a 2.0. At 4 ink, a 3/3, quest for 2 lore. Mulan Reflecting really makes you reflect as to why this Shift 2 Mulan has only targets that cost 3 or more to shift onto. I don't think I've seen another card that has a shift cost lower than the casting cost of all of the units you could put on it. I could be wrong. Definitely something to look for in the future. This is one of those cards that might not see play right now, but in general, it has a lot of things about it that the more cards that come out, the much better this gets. There's the potential that eventually the top, like you could play a deck that is half songs and the top of your deck is always going to basically be a song for you to cast. And if we eventually get a Mulan Goon at 1 cost, the Shift 2 might matter. In general, it is a 2.5 to 3 with lots of potential. Just, I don't think any of it's there this set. We're going to have to wait a little longer to see Mulan hand in the business. At 2 ink, being a 1/3 that quests for 1, Nana, Darling Family Pet, is quite the darling. Whenever you play a Floodborn character, you may remove all damage from chosen character. This has so many synergistic plays with it, and it plays with Rapunzel quite nicely. In general, there'll probably be a home for this in one of the heal-based archetypes. I probably would not play it outside of heal synergies that draw cards, but that said, it is a solid 3.0 in its respected archetypes, and such a role player, it could even be a 4.0 in those and the card you always want to draw. Piglet, very small animal, at 3 ink being a 2/4, it quests for 2. It's not that impressive, quite mid indeed. It's quests for 2 though at 3 ink and has a 4 butt, so it's at least a 2.0. Not really that splashy, vanilla, doesn't do much, probably will not see very much play. At 5 ink being a 0/6 that quests for 2, Rapunzel Gifted Artist is not bad. It has some decent ability where you remove 1 or more damage from your characters, you draw a card whenever it happens. It shifts in for 3, not bad. The only issue is it's competing with 4-drop Rapunzel, which is just hands down better. But this has the interaction of staying in play, and the longer it's in play, the more cards you could draw. So it's definitely going to see play in the heal-based deck. Whether or not it says a 1 or 2 of or a solid 4 of will be hard to see, only time will tell. Definite, at least a 3.5. Costing 2, being a 1/4 that quests for 1, Rapunzel Sunshine has an alright ability that you can activate it to remove 2 damage from a chosen character. She's got a big butt, a cheap cost so you can shift your more expensive Rapunzels onto it. And while it also plays with Rockstar, it's still just a little mid. Once again, we have a 2.0, maybe a 2.5 with potential. Sleepy Nodding Off costs 2 ink. It's a 2/3, quests for 2 lore, comes into play exerted. Not too amazing, but also not bad at all. It's a solid 3.0. It's going to fill into the 7 Dwarfs deck. It's going to be your early plays there. And if you have multiple Snow Whites, it could even be free, creating some crazy synergies with Rockstar in a 7 Dwarf Rockstar based deck. Solid 3.0. Sneezy, very allergic. 2 ink, 1/4, quest for 1 lore. Once again, we get another low-cost dwarf, which is what we want to be seen. We want them to be playable with Rockstar. We want to take advantage of the Snow White cost reducer, which we'll see later in this review. The ability on this, whenever you play this or another 7 Dwarves character, you may give chosen character -1 attack this turn, is actually better than it first looks. It's going to be a solid 3.0 that's going to mess up some combat math if it's in play. And if there's multiple in play, your opponents cannot really quest effectively without losing their units. At 2 ink, being a 2/3, Snow White Lost in the Forest, she quests for 1. When she comes into play, you can remove up to 2 damage from chosen character. It doesn't do too much on its own, a little bit of heal, but we've seen with Timon being a 1-drop 1/2 quests for 1 that heals 1 when it comes into play, solid no play. If this Snow White is seen play, it's going to be strictly on the back of a shiftable Snow White. It's a 2.0. At 2 ink, a 1/2, quest for 1, Snow White, Unexpected House Guest, reduces the cost of your dwarves. This is one of the payoffs of playing a 7 dwarf deck. It's going to cast on turn 2, and then on turn 3, it's going to allow you to play 1 to 3 dwarves on that turn. You'll let you ramp into a 4-drop on turn 3, play 3 2-drops, play a 3-drop and a 2-drop. It could even go crazier if you were to then play another Snow White and then drop multiple 2s for free. There's a magical Christmas land that you're playing Stitch on turn 1, then you're playing Lantern, turn 3, you're shifting Rockstar the next turn, you play Snow White, you draw a card, you play Snow White, you draw a card, and you play like 7 or 8 2-drop dwarves, drawing a bunch of cards and pass with basically lethal in 2 turns. Highly unlikely. Will I build it and will it be fun? Most definitely. This Snow White, it is a synergistic team player, role player. It requires a build around strategy. It is going to be a 1.0 to a 4.0 depending on how good the deck is and in the meta. So in general, I'm going to rate her as a 3 with potential and keep eyes on her. Costing 6, being a 3/5 that quests for 2 with shift 4, Snow White Well-Wisher is not bad. Not bad at all. Quite good even. I'm a big fan of Hades, and having whenever this creature quests you may return a character from your discard to your hand is very powerful. And the shift 4 makes us go back to our 2-cost Snow White that was inkable, that when it comes into play you heal 2, gives this something cheap to shift onto that's not bad. We don't want to be playing the other Snow White that's uninkable that has dwarf synergies, because we don't want too many uninkables in our deck. But if we're going for value mid-range, the come into play heal 2 with this for shifting is quite good. Playing the 2-drop on turn 5 to heal something and then playing a 3-drop to interact, followed by the next turn shifting a Snow White, returning one of your cheap plays and then playing it, is quite powerful. This would have instantly gone into as a 2 to 4 of in the Amber Steel mid-range decks of set 1, almost guaranteed. They're already playing Hades. Playing 6 copies of Hades seems pretty good. The power level on this card is insane. Maybe I'll shoot myself in the foot by saying it, but this is a 4 to a 4.5 card. Big fan. The Queen, Commanding Presence. At 5 ink, being a 4/3 quest for 2 with shift 2 is absurd if the conditions are met. And whenever it quests, choosing an opposing character gets -4 power and another character gets +4 power. Very good at nerfing your opponent's bodyguard or character you're planning on attacking, pumping a little 1-drop up to trade with a 5-drop. It's already good value. You add the fact that there's already an archetype that sings 5-cast songs on shifted units on turns 3 and 4. This fits right in. We know we have a 1-drop goon already, so we have a shift target. In general, this card is going to see a lot of play. Preemptively, I'm giving it a 4.0. It's in the right colors for an already established archetype, and it fills a role that was already filled by an uninkable unit, and it's an easy swap that's just a pure upgrade. It's going to see a lot of play. We should be very, very happy that this card is in a precon. Coming in at 1 ink, a 2/2 quest for 1. It is the Queen Goon, Regal Monarch. This is the reason that the card we just looked at is playable. Having a 1-drop that you can shift on at lower than average cost. Most 5-drop shifts shift for 3 or more. Only shifting for 2 is incredibly powerful. While there is arguments on whether or not you would even want to do it, if you're on the play, you can play Queen on turn 1, turn 2, shift Queen, and then play a whole new world. Some people ask, why would you do that on turn 2? Well, you're already down 3 cards. And if you're on the play, it means you're down another card. So at this point, if you are whole new worlding on turn 2 with this, it seems unlikely that your opponent, who's only had 1 play, unless they play the new red drop Reckless 1/3, they're highly unlikely to be able to remove it before you untap and do even more things with it. As a goon, it is just a 2.0, 2.5. The fact that it has a shiftable unit to put on it, this queen is a role player and will be a role player as long as the shiftable queen sees play. In the format, it's going to be an easy 3.5. I don't know if maybe I should be rating it as high as the Queen. And extra copies, you can Rockstar. In general, very synergistic. I wouldn't play it without the shift stuff. At 2 ink, this action removes 4 damage from chosen character. Very weak. I would almost always rather just have the Snow White that heals half as much. In general, I feel this is weak. 1.0. 2 ink, action, last stand. Banish chosen character that was challenged this turn. This is an interesting card, and I think if it was inkable, it would possibly see much more play. The fact that you have to challenge the unit already means this is basically chosen character gains challenger 8 or something of the sort. Having to challenge something and then use this to remove it, you're like basically 2-for-1ing yourself almost each time. Unless you have something in play that triggers off of actions or your opponent doing something, there's a lot better than this. In general, just like the last action, this is very subpar, a 1.0. Although, that said, this one is quite playable in Limited, I think. At 2 ink, Painting the Roses Red, a solid song. You draw a card and you shrink 2 units. In Limited, I think this is insane. In Limited, I would put this as a 4.5. It is a cheap combat trick that replaces itself that you can sing off of things. Very hype on this, but not in Constructed. If there were sideboards, I could see this in an aggro v aggro, but there's not sideboards. It's at least inkable. It's possible that it's something that would be an okay 1 or 2 of. If I end up playing a deck and it has flex slots and aggro matchups need to be kind of dealt with in a manner when I'm trading units constantly, this helps not do that, like not losing my units on the trade, as well as replacing itself. Has potential. It's a 2.5. 2 ink, Sleeper's Flute, item, activate. If you played a song, gain 1 lore. There is a lot of songs. Most of them are removal. Some of them are more card draw. While this card might not be good enough at the moment, I could see a world where you're gaining 2 to 3 lore a turn off of this because you have multiples in play and you're wiping the board off of Be Prepared. With Sleeper's Flute and Ursula's Necklace, we have a shell of a song-based deck. You can go into Emerald for having ramp on your songs, but most likely you're going to have to go into either Steel or Ruby, so you have a way to deal with the board. Definitely a game player. As it sits now, it's probably a 2.0, but has potential to be like a 3.5 to a 4 in the right archetype. Dragon's Gem. At 3 ink, this item returns a character with support from your discard to your hand for activating of 3. When I first read this card, I thought it just returned a character from your discard to your hand for 3, and I thought it was still at that point a little expensive, but possibly nutty broken. Having to have support basically makes this card unplayable and is a 1.0. It's possible that there's going to be a couple support units that are just so broken that you just looping them wins you the game, and if that becomes the case, the stocks on Dragon Gem go up, 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 but as it is, just a 1.0. At 2 ink, 0 to hero, it's a song, you count the number of characters you have, and the next unit you play this turn costs that much less. Lots of speculation on this card. Lots of people are very about it, and they all want to be casting Surfers on turn 4, or possibly turn 3. In general, I think it's a little bit of a gambler's card, but has a very high ceiling, a solid 3.0. It's not going to fit in every deck, but if you're hyper aggressive, you can very easily use this to cheat out a Rockstar or a Surfer, play Rockstar with it, and then play 3 or more units when you already had 2 or 3 into play, can create a board state that your opponents cannot come back from. Playing a Surfer similarly on turns 4 or 5 is very difficult for most decks to come back from. In general, this will be quite good in decks that are able to offset the fact that you're having to play rituals. At 3 ink, World's Greatest Criminal Mind is a pretty solid song. You banish chosen character with 5 power or more. When I first read this, I thought it was a little weak, and then I read countless people posting about how you can support your opponent's creatures. It's going to up the playability of this card quite a bit. You can quest with 2 or 3 supporters, pump something up, hit it with this. Or you can use the Queen that we already talked about, gave a pretty high rating, to nerf one of your opponent's creatures and pump another one. And then you can sing this to get rid of the one you pumped up. It has a lot of synergies, and it deals with some of the more bigger threats that might be difficult to deal with. But it also misses a lot of the cards in play without assistance, and in that regard, it is a 2.5. With synergistic combos, it could easily be a 4.0 removal spell, but you have to have things to go with it. Overall, Amber had quite a few good cards. I'm a little disappointed in the variety of 7 dwarves. I'm still going to try to build a 7 dwarf deck, as it just seems too flavorful not to at least dab in. We did get a couple powerful shifters with different abilities, and it seems like a couple new archetypes very well could be built. And that's really what we want to see, is a wide format with a lot of different playable cards. There is some power creep, but not too much overall. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I should have the other colors up shortly. Thank you.